Everything is possible.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Zahira Bam Ismail right here at Salam Media offices with news and views. We were just chatting to Marie Claire earlier with regards to the current situation in the DRC. And I think we can never discount or underestimate the impact of any form of war around the world, the impact of any human being losing their human rights and having human right violations. We cannot be like the West and think that we're going to be select about the people that we look at or the people that we are supporting or the people that we are speaking about and bringing to the forefront the plight of people, the plight of the many people who are suffering. When we speak about human rights, it should be for every single person. And when we speak about the right to be able to live with autonomy and with dignity and with honor, we should want that not just for ourselves, but for every single person around. I think when we looked at the numbers, as Marie Claire mentioned, we are looking at 6 million deaths since 1996. 6 million deaths. That's a very long time. And then we've also had 6.9 million people displaced. And I think we can't take for granted what those numbers actually look like, to the point that it's really unsafe for civilians. So even when you're making your purchasing decisions, you need to make it with a certain level of ethics and a consciousness. We started off the conversations at the beginning of the week talking about a level of consciousness. And this is something we really have to carry with us, because as she mentioned, natural resources are being stripped out of the country and being used for our purchases. So if we're not being aware of that, we can talk about the boycotting of products, but if we're not being aware of the natural resources being stripped out of our continent, out of countries in Africa, then we also selling ourselves short. And it's time that we start living consciously and start becoming more vocal about it, because everything around here is about money, right? Everything is about purchasing power. It's about where we spend our money, how we spend our money, what we're purchasing, what we're buying. And it's time to bring that back home. Africa is a hugely rich country. We need to start supporting our own. We need to start building our own, and we need to start bringing back our funds here. When we start doing things like that, we're building on an ethical basis. We're putting Africa on a different level, and we stop other countries from coming in and stripping natural resources and taking things that do not belong to them. The people who live in countries, if they are not benefiting from it, those other countries should not be there imposing their law on them. Question all the time what you're purchasing, where it's coming from. Are the people from where it's being taken being looted, or are they actually benefiting from it? Or is it just a select group that's benefiting and creating chaos for everyone else around them? These are conscious decisions, and we need to start living with a level of consciousness, especially now being here on the African continent. Yesterday, we had a remarkable opportunity to be able to sit with the Minister, Naledi Pandor. And I think every single person in our team was very overwhelmed by the remarkable aura of this woman. She really is someone with great integrity, someone who is really unafraid. And I think this is something we rarely see in politics anymore. And when you do see that, when you see someone speaking true to their values and their principles, you understand that they are truly the leaders that we are looking for. With that, we'd like to now bring you the one-on-one, on-air exclusive just for Salam Media with Minister Naledi Pandor. Stay tuned.
The summit in February for having taken the step of approaching the ICJ. And in fact, African leaders indicated their interest in having more detail on the case and articulating much more publicly support for the cause of the people of Palestine.
I think what was remarkable for many people and for many countries, as you just mentioned, was the fact that somebody who wasn't a superpower, as noted by the rest of the world, was willing to take on a case with conviction and with integrity. And it showed so many people the power of just believing in oneself to be able to stand up for what is right, regardless of who you're standing up against. So I think a huge congratulations to the South African government for being able to take that step. And we had a remarkable team heading that up on our behalf. Minister, going into that, on the 6th of March, the South African legal team went back again to the ICJ to ask the ICJ to look again at its decision that was made, to make different amendments to it. And ICJ does have jurisdiction to make changes. And yet we're sitting here 45 days later, 160 days into the war, and we're seeing a catastrophe at levels that are unprecedented. And yet we're not seeing anything from the ICJ as yet.
Well, the ICJ has issued the provisional measures as orders from the court. These have been ignored by Israel. And as I have stated previously, a large part of our problem with respect to impunity and conduct of states that is against international law and abuses human rights, as the state of Israel has done. The problem is we don't have global enforcement capacity. So the globe is unable to act in support of innocent people who are suffering the kind of slaughter we are seeing every day in Palestine. So when we speak of reform of the United Nations, one of the aspects that we are referring to is this ability to enforce peace, to enforce cessation of hostilities. We also, of course, have the challenge of the UN Security Council, where when cessation is debated, the most powerful countries are the ones that exercise their veto, even in the face of the kind of massacre that we are all witnessing. So it is disturbing that we don't have as yet an organizational form that would allow the democratic voice, which we hear in the General Assembly, exercise its weight, because the majority of members of the UN are totally offended by what Israel is doing to the people of Palestine.
And I think this is where we are as lay people watching in. We're seeing these messages coming across. We're seeing the majority of the General Assembly saying this is something that they're not pleased with. We're seeing the ICJ requisition saying that this is what needs to be done. And yet a single veto at a UN Council puts all of that aside and wipes out the rights of an entire nation. The question then comes, what is the point or the credibility of being held by the UN and the ICJ if they're not able to still do what's right for every single human being? Because it seems like human rights are afforded to a very select group of people.
This is part of the problem of the world. The weak are ignored, and the strong, their will is what really operates in the world. We have been arguing for a long time, I repeat the point, of reform. It's very, very important. Remember, the United Nations in its current construct was established in 1948. Many countries in the world were under colonial domination at that time. Today we are free nations, but we've not reconstructed the mechanisms of the United Nations. And this is clearly urgently necessary. But I don't want to undermine the important decisions that were handed down by the ICJ. Remember, this is the premier global court of the world, and its decisions do have meaning and merit. And whether it will be that you are considered a fugitive because of genocide, the fact of the ruling is extremely important. So a major victory has been won. For the first time, we had Israel in a court attempting dismally to defend its blatant murder of Palestinian people. And clearly, it was obvious to everybody that the indefensible was being referred to, and their lawyers could hardly hold up a defense against the really excellent legal arguments put forward by the South African legal team. So all of that is now before the world. If we hadn't had an ICJ, if we hadn't approached an ICJ, we wouldn't have that. So while there are inadequacies and weaknesses, but we must never undermine what has been achieved. I think it's singularly important.
Absolutely, and I must concur with you that the legal team that represented South Africa was phenomenal, and it did bring to light many of the atrocities that wouldn't otherwise have been there because mainstream media was not reflecting any of that. So you're absolutely right in that sense. Minister, following from that, right now we have the barricading of humanitarian aid going in, and ICJ has, and our legal teams have referred to it as being man-made, being deliberate, being predictable, and also preventable. We're sitting here listening to countries speaking about getting aid in, dropping aid in. We're speaking about ports being built, but it almost seems like that's just to buy time, because if you really wanted to get aid in, we're still arming. We've got countries who are still arming and aiding Israel in the genocide, but are saying we'll find alternate ways to get aid in, and we think getting humanitarian aid in is possible. The dichotomy is absurd.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're just seeing a huge contradiction and countries misrepresenting their notions of human rights and international law. These are countries that for many decades have attempted to educate us about human rights, but we now understand that actually what they mean is for some and not for all. And clearly the treatment of Palestinian people vis-a-vis how the West has responded to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you see huge dissonance, which suggests that Palestinian people are not regarded as human beings who should be cared for and protected, while Ukrainians are given arms by the most powerful countries, are given money, billions, and yet Palestinian people are denied water, food, fuel, energy, publicly by Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government.
And yet there's no accountability, because a Prime We're going to be taking a very quick ad break, and then we will be back straight after to continue the interview with Minister Naledi Pandor.
Media. Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
This Ramadan, join hands with Muslim hands to make a meaningful difference in the lives of millions worldwide. Your zakah and sadaqah can be the lifeline for those in need. Together we can nourish the hungry in South Africa and across the globe, offer clean water to impoverished communities, empower women with sustainable livelihoods, and bring relief to families grappling with the aftermath of natural disasters and conflict. Be their beacon of hope today. Connect with us at muslimhands.org.za or dial 021 633 6413 to extend your support.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
The Turkey-Syria earthquake is among the deadliest earthquakes of the last century. Thousands have lost their lives, and large areas and cities and towns in southern Turkey and northern Syria have turned to rubble, leaving huge numbers of residents with very little or nothing at all. Al Imdad Foundation's emergency relief team is on the ground providing life-saving aid. The people of Turkey and Syria desperately need your support. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Searching for elite local and international investment and advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Mayer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Mayer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Mayer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Mayer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmayer.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Mayer, where every detail matters.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
This is Salam Media, and you are listening to Zahira Bam Ismail.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to News and Views right here on Salam Media. We'll be continuing with the interview with our distinguished Minister Naledi Pandor. Stay tuned.
And people vis-a-vis how the West has responded to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you see huge dissonance, which suggests that Palestinian people are not regarded as human beings who should be cared for and protected, while Ukrainians are given arms by the most powerful countries, are given money, billions, and yet Palestinian people are denied water, food, fuel, energy, publicly by Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government.
And yet there's no accountability because Prime Minister Netanyahu still gets on air speaking about bombing Rafah, regardless of the amount of civilians there, saying that he'll move them to safe spaces, and yet there's absolutely no safe space left.
You know, the problem we've been speaking of is the fact that for many, many years, Israel has had impunity. Many of us, when we talk about what's happening to Palestine today, we forget to mention that Palestine has been occupied for more than 7 decades, that the people of Palestine have not enjoyed human rights for more than 7 decades, that they're treated like third-class citizens. We know and understand oppression. We know discrimination. We know denial of rights. And so while we're a country that's rather to the margins of the powerful, it's correct that South Africa and its people who understand oppression and exclusion very, very well are the nation that stood up. And I think this is very, very important. What we would like to see in terms of aid is that all the trucks at the borders, Israel must open the borders. And Israel's friends must tell them to open the borders and not find alternative ways of bringing in aid, because those alternatives are saying to Israel, it's okay, you can carry on with your murder of people, with decapitation of children, with murder of women. Meantime, we'll drop aid and the Palestinians can run and get a little packet of food and then run back to try and hide and be shot in that instance.
During that time. And
it's just so, it fills me with such dismay and anger the way that Palestinians are being treated and what is happening in the world today with the world watching. And I know there are countries with the ability and the power to make a difference, to ensure that even in the course of a conflict, people are treated in terms of international law. International humanitarian law and international law were constructed to address these very situations, and the countries that were largely behind formulating such treaties and instruments are the ones who are supporting their breach today.
Absolutely. Minister, we were chatting to one of our colleagues in Gaza just a few days ago and could actually hear bombs in the background during that interview. And that has become such a part of their lives that they actually have no idea if they're going to be around tomorrow.
Yeah.
We've seen families being massacred, and yet there's still a justification for this being, oh, we're looking after civilians, we're taking care of civilians, this is just looking for Hamas.
Well, I don't think every Palestinian is a Hamas activist. And so, to say these are Hamas supporters is really a dishonesty, blatant lies. To say that this is a protective shield held by Hamas is totally untrue. We know that people have been murdered while trying to act on the instructions of the Israeli government when they're told to move from one part to another. As they're moving, they're being bombarded.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, our belief that genocide is underway is related to the incidents all of us have observed. There is no government that conducts itself in that way, or army, that can argue that it does not have a genocidal intent. When you say to people, move here, and you kill them as they're moving, next thing you say, move there, and you kill them as, it just suggests your intent is total elimination of the group.
That's it. And the way ICJ retrospectively found that Bosnia was then a genocide, I think we're going to end up looking at history repeating itself, despite us saying all the time, never again, never while we're alive, never while we're seeing this being documented. And we're seeing parliamentarians and we're seeing the Prime Minister speaking out and openly about what he is doing. Minister, one of the statements you recently made was about South Africans joining the IDF and coming back home. Please could you elaborate on that?
Well, we have a law that says that you cannot participate in a conflict in another country as a South African unless you have approached the authorities and got particular permission, and there are conditions associated with that. It may be an ally of South Africa and so on. But you can't be involved in a conflict willy-nilly, and particularly a murderous one such as this one. In terms of the law, the prosecuting authority should arrest these people upon their return to South Africa. I have written to my colleague, the Minister of Justice, and I've made a statement about the act to say that it is, in fact, within the law that these people should be prosecuted. And I hope that our government will really act on that, because people shouldn't believe that they can act as they wish and become mercenaries in wars elsewhere.
Absolutely, because that opens then very many conversations and brackets. So we hope that that law does get enforced. Minister, you've got an upcoming trip to the US. How do you manage that in light of knowing what their support is, and how do you see yourself being received when you attend this event?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that we will meet some friends in the United States. We'll meet a range of organizations, both Muslim people who support the people of Palestine, Jewish people for a free Palestine, public representatives, some who are against our support for the people of Palestine, some who are supportive. We'll also meet the former anti-apartheid organizations, or civil society. So it will be a broad range. I'll speak at universities as well. So really trying to articulate South Africa's position and hopefully an understanding that an injustice is underway and that this most powerful country, as it approaches elections, needs to think about the role it is playing in engendering either insecurity or peace and security in the world.
In light of you fighting so strongly and being so vocal for the rights of every human being, especially the Palestinians, how do you manage your relations with Israel as a country?
Well, we really don't have much of a relation. We have an embassy in Ramallah, and given that Israel is the occupier in Palestine, the diplomatic status of our embassy there is granted by the occupying state. So that is the level of relation. But we don't have official exchanges. This is a long-standing position of the government of democratic South Africa. Prior to that, of course, Israel was a firm supporter of the apartheid state, and that's something we forget. But we have not established strong relations, and in fact our embassy has been temporarily closed, and we've said when we see positive steps being taken, we will consider whether we reopen it.
Minister, the move behind such a vocal support has also met with some criticism, or at least some conversations, that this is lobbying for support in the upcoming elections. How do you respond to that?
Well, I find it very odd, I must say, because it shows that there are people in South Africa who don't know the history of the liberation movements. Our association with Palestine goes back many, many decades. This is why one of the first freedom struggles President Mandela spoke about when he became president of this country, the first democratically elected president, was the situation of the people of Palestine. In 1995, he said, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the people of Palestine." Why? Because Palestinian people, even under dismal conditions, supported us in the international solidarity movement against apartheid, stood with us, where we trained our freedom fighters, and so were solidly working closely, particularly with the ANC and the other liberation organizations. So this is an old established relationship. And of course, we are not like other hypocritical people. We don't drop our friends and make new friends just because it suits us. We believe in international solidarity. We believe in bonds of friendship. And we believe the cause for freedom and justice is right. And we've always understood that when we sought freedom and asked others to give us a hand in that search, we then took on an obligation that when others are oppressed, we must offer support.
And you have done that with absolute dignity and honor. I think, as I mentioned right at the beginning of the interview, you triggered an international consciousness. And I think what's remarkable is that you just ascertained, just confirmed also now, that this wasn't a strategic move. It was actually remembering friends and doing what's right. And I think being able to give a voice to so many voiceless people, and so many people who've often found that human rights, again, only applies to a certain select group of people. South Africa has come out very strongly in saying this. How do you see yourself as a country in terms of the African Union, now overseeing things that are happening in Africa and around the world? Because I think many people and many countries will now look to South Africa for that level of consciousness.
They're already doing so. I'm getting lots of letters. Well, I think we must give a solid support where there's conflict. I think conflict is really a huge problem on the African continent because when you don't have peace, you can't focus on development. So I do think we must give increased support to resolving conflicts across the continent. We're already involved, as you would be aware, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Our president works very hard with South Sudan as they implement their revitalized agreement, trying to draw the two parties together and other forces in that country. He has the deputy president as his special envoy who does visit South Sudan. And we are really intensifying efforts there. I think we need to do more with respect to Sudan. President has met the two opposing leaders, and we're hoping that, we can again have a sit down with the two present and begin to discuss beyond the current aggression in that country. So I think we must continue our involvement and even up it. We are in fact so involved in a range of conflict resolution initiatives that we are intending to establish a capacity within the department, because clearly this is an area in which there's a lot of work. It's important to have experts who understand conflict resolution and negotiation. So we will be creating such a unit.
And I think it's important for all of us to know that so much more is being done than just in Palestine.
Yes, indeed.
It's being done on the African continent, and South Africa is actively involved in trying to resolve conflicts all over. Minister, lastly, what do you see going forward as being the solution to the Palestinian situation?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say that this approach to the ICJ was led by our president, President Ramaphosa, and ably supported by the initiator of this whole focus on the convention, who was Minister Lamola. I just happened to be the public face, but there's a whole team, and there was a cabinet decision on it, which is very important. It's not just the department, the whole of government discussed this matter and agreed that we should proceed. So to the next steps. Well, I think firstly we should continue to approach the ICJ and ensure that we are putting in place the rungs of evidence that will support us when we get to hear the merits of the genocide case, because that's the most important part of our case. So we need to continue. For example, as the threats on Rafah are growing, we've now written to the court again. As aid is denied and starvation is clear, we've approached the court. So we just keep at it. Don't tire and don't neglect to address this very important issue. So the ICJ case is important. But second, as we argue for cessation, and I think we must talk about that more and more and more and more, especially at the UN level, we must also push for negotiations toward a two-state solution so that we resolve this as much as we can once and for all. Of course, we don't know whether it would bring a lasting peace, but I think it would be a major step. The people of Palestine deserve self-determination, deserve to have their own state, deserve to enjoy freedom and human rights and their own institutions, just as we do. We don't want them to be walking in a corridor where they are constantly asked for an ID, where they're told where to walk. We want them to be free like us, not to be in a ghetto, which is what we experience. That must come to an end. And I think we should intensify efforts and be focused as the government, but also as the people of South Africa. I believe civil society has a critical role to play. And this is why I've asked all of us, wherever I've spoken, let's continue the campaign. Let's petition. Let's write to the newspapers. Let's explain to those who don't understand. Some think it's a religious conflict between Muslims and those of the Jewish faith. It's totally untrue. This is blatant oppression, denial of human rights, and abuse of a people. And we must say it publicly every day.
Minister, I think you've given us wise words that we can hold on to, that this is not just a government fight, but fight for civilians and active citizens as well to continue and never tire of it, because this is their daily reality that's being faced as well. We look forward, Minister, to chatting to you in a few months' time as well, hopefully with a little bit more better news and a way forward. Shukran so much for joining us on air at Salam Media.
Afwan, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
That was Zahira Bam Ismail for Salam Media, chatting to Minister Naledi Pandor here in Cape Town. Shukran for joining us on air. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was a remarkable interview with Minister Naledi Pandor, shedding light as to the ICJ rulings, South Africa's role in it. We day 161 post the war starting and day 46 since the ICJ ruling. We brought up a number of topics of the judicial autonomy of ICJ, the jurisdiction they have, the ability to be able to change it, yet we're not seeing it. We're talking about countries who developed human rights laws that the UN is supposed to be invoking and protecting, and yet we're seeing a violation and a breach of these laws by those very countries. And as we mentioned through that interview, it seems that human rights are for a select group of people and not for all. But the majority of people need to continue using their voices, and we need to continue speaking up and continue making sure that this comes into the forefront of news. Western media may forget it and move on with their stories, as we've watched earlier this week on Salam Media with the stories in Syria, with the stories in the DRC. But we can continue changing our narrative, controlling our narrative, and bringing these stories to the forefront so that nobody is ever forgotten and that human rights continues to be available for every single person out there, not just for the select few. Shukran for joining us. Stay tuned after the ad break. We'll continue with the show.